Venom is certainly not the only character whose story or origins come from a fan idea. But as I've been thinking of the character lately, he sure is perhaps the most successful example of that in action. That Spider-Man might look cool in a black costume has led to the second most popular Spider-Man villain there is, second only to the Green Goblin. In spite of the constant hand-wringing of academics and critics, I've always felt there's good reason for this too. In the world of formal analysis, Venom is correctly identified as not exactly a deep villain. His behavior is that of a wounded animal, lashing out and abandoned by its original owner. And since then, he's been everything from outright dangerous to fully cooperative. A character with a range that spans a bestial and mindless monster to a clever and careful anti-hero. One thing seems clear to me across all versions of Venom. He's just so damn cool. Every appearance of this villain is terrifying. Just a giant wall of teeth, tongue, and saliva every time he shows up. He's strong, aggressive, and amazing. And so it was for years and years. Venom actually turns 30 within days of me recording this video. Across countless stories and spin-off characters, the 90s cartoon where I was introduced to him, and for better and worse, even on the big screen, first in Spider-Man 3 and now this year with his own solo movie, Venom is an unmitigated hit of a villain. Though I'd point out there's a bit of a critical divide on this one. Fans love the dude where a lot of critics are more ambivalent, and in this particular case, I side with the fans on this one. I like everything about Venom, from his characteristic appearance, especially when Venom just towers over his opponents, to the way the being tends to talk and think as a collective with the host. We are Venom. It's a basic thing, but a very fun little detail that gets right down to who this villain is, and more importantly, what it is. It's a constant partnership between symbiote and host, and the disposition and appearance of the villain is often heavily influenced by that host's background and identity. At some point in comic book history, it became clear Marvel felt the character needed a change of pace. Eddie Brock was an okay host for the character, but things were getting repetitive on the comic side of the world. After so many symbiote side characters and various weird plots for the villain, some of which were great and some of which were lacking, the time felt ready for a change, and it was all thanks to this man. Actually, we're getting ahead of ourselves. He comes later. It was actually this guy who first changed it, and that's Mark Millar. In a story written by him, Eddie Brock gave up the symbiote and eventually fell into the hands of Matt Gargan. Venom got seriously amped up by this change, likely because of the bond with an already existing supervillain exacerbated the dark impulses of both characters. In other words, he went nuts, looking more intimidating than ever while developing a rather troubling cannibalism habit. This went on for a while, up until he too lost the symbiote and it was turned over to government custody. That's where this man and our video truly begins. For it is Rick Remender that is my all-time favorite Venom writer. His style really was always kind of perfect for this character. Brash, over-the-top, heavy on violence, yet with a consistent focus on strong and sincere character work. This is Rick Remender's writing to a T, and he really made an impact on Marvel through titles like Uncanny X-Force, Axis, and of course, Agent Venom. Now this is where I'd normally go into the origins and bio of the character, yet luckily we've already covered that here on Comic Island. It's actually one of our oldest videos and the first origins and bio we ever did. Joey did a great job on covering everything that pretty much happened with Agent Venom. And as such, if you haven't seen that video, I recommend you go check it out now. It's easy to find on our channel, and I'll provide the link in the video description below. Instead, it frees me up to talk about what this character is and what he means to me, because he does mean quite a bit to me as a comic book character. It's one of the greatest stories ever told in the modern age, so let's get into it a little bit. While the origins and bio video we created is a good start, there is little to actually replace reading these comics, and I do recommend you track them down one way or another for yourself. It's referred to alternatively as the Agent Venom series or Venom Volume 2, but the comics themselves aren't too hard to find as they are fairly recent. And it's definitely worth reading. This series is a dark story about a veteran who lost his legs in war and gets a real, miraculous chance to walk again, yet has to endure the most extreme of circumstances to enjoy his full mobility. Mixed in with that is a heartfelt and deeply realistic depiction of Flash's struggles with alcoholism, PTSD, and years of abuse during his childhood at the hands of his father. It gives hindsight and meaning to Flash's years of tormenting Peter Parker in high school, and why exactly he was the way he was. Up until now, Eugene Thompson had pretty much been a standard bully character with little to offer until we started getting into the depth of him and the true heroism of the man, even before he got his powers. Yet it never pulls punches in terms of Flash having been affected by his history. He isn't exactly a 100% good person either. He's a soldier who has no compunction with killing, and he very much was a bully in childhood, even if the reasons for his behavior are understandable in hindsight. And what really seals it is Tony Moore's artwork, which absolutely knocks things out of the park. With high quality images and a team of great inkers and colorists that delivered a polished series, to the extent that on the whole I consider this run of Venom a real benchmark of quality when it comes to modern comics. This is the sort of thing I hold up as a standard for just how smart an otherwise laid-back action story might be. Because as sobering and thoughtful a series as Venom can be, at the same time it is resolutely and consistently focused on having fun. As dark as the subject matter is, the series is full of great action that ranges in setting from the Savage Lands to the streets of New York City. And all of that happens within the first few issues. Flash finds himself matched with excellent villains and enemies, while also finding a real unexpected sense of partnership with the alien suit itself. It seems to gain a sense of purpose in its bonding with Flash, and I've always believed firmly that Venom on some level also notices that this is the only real host it ever actually is successful at doing stuff with. Because it sure seems to get along with Flash and hold him in esteem on a level it doesn't with its other hosts. The suit has on multiple occasions had the opportunity to flee Flash over the years and turns it down every time. On the first occasion this happened, the aliens said they had a mission and seemed intent on completing it, even though it personally had no stakes in whether or not the mission was a success. When it finally did get separated from Flash Thompson, it was done so through force, and the alien suit really didn't have much of a say in the matter. It says a lot about the alien and just how bad an influence Eddie Brock and Matt Gargan really were to it. And the character work surrounding Venom is done well in this series. But the best stuff really has to do with Flash and the other people in his life. Most notably Betty Brant, who serves as the romantic interest that shares a lot in common with Flash, due to the past abuse both have suffered at the hands of others. Flash himself is by far the best written of all of these characters. Realism is the first word that comes to mind when describing this particular superhero. His alcoholism, his trauma from the war, his tendency to fall into relapse, a lot of that stuff rings as very real. Flash's troubles aren't some relic from the past, they are often front and center in his mind, and as such the trauma feels very authentic and true to his character. But also true to the reality of addiction and trauma itself. It doesn't just go away when first confronted, it is a struggle and a constant uphill battle. So seeing that in action and done well is a remarkable thing. And as for the villains, well, it takes a hell of a good series to make a new version of Jack-o'-lantern fun, intimidating, and one of my all-time favorites. He and Crime Master are the main antagonists for Rick Remender's run with the character, and they are so damn great. They very much carry this run of comics just as much as Venom does. With other conflicts involving heroes such as Spider-Man or Red Hulk, who are all too aware of Venom's past and intend to shut the hero down, so to speak, this series worked, and it worked so damn well, I think Marvel's had a lot of trouble following through with the character ever since. No other writer has managed to sustain a series as long or as well as Remender did after leaving. But that's okay. The story was told. We got a good beginning, middle, and end to it, and the Flash had started to find his place in the superhero world. He and Venom had learned to work together and established a permanent bond with each other. And in spite of the desires of the government, they gained their own sort of independence thanks to Steve Rogers, having up until then spent most of their career under the close supervision of Project Rebirth, a government organization that managed to get Venom working with Flash. For a while, Flash and Venom had fled government custody and were on the run from Project Rebirth, yet once they got the general acceptance of Steve Rogers in play, they began to shift their focus and moved away from solo series towards team settings, and Flash worked with and started to build the trust of the superhero community, serving with the likes of Avengers, Thunderbolts, and the Guardians of the Galaxy. With the latter, Venom encountered his home world for the first time, and was more properly bonded with Flash, increasing their abilities and becoming a sort of space knight before... well, I don't know what really happened. Something caused Marvel to decide it was time once again for a change. Flash was separated from the symbiote who found itself back in the clutches of Eddie Brock, while Thompson is now Agent Anti-Venom. That's alright, since we aren't walking away from all the ground this character has already tread, and it's an amusing reversal of the situation between Agent Venom and Anti-Venom from earlier in Spider-Man history. I'm not fully against this concept in theory, since this entire video thus far has been about positive changes made to Venom over the years by changing his hosts. Yet this move has always felt different compared to the other changes with hosts we've talked about over the years with Venom. Unlike every other change that's happened thus far, this was a real step backwards. And while that's not inherently or necessarily wrong, one would hope Marvel has or had plans or intentions for this character that required or necessitated such a change to begin with. Because what we've gotten so far kind of feels like bait. Venom Inc., Venom Verse, and other such content frankly feels like it's been alright. The sort of flashy stuff that might sell comics, but the comics themselves are fine. Nothing close to the thoughtful mix of depth and fun of the Remender days. But those days, to be fair, were behind us long before this regardless. To be honest, I'm alright with the whole situation. Good stories and characters come and go. I'll never forget the initial run of Agent Venom because it's so damn good it practically is ingrained on my soul. And there's a lot of other people out there like me, some of whom one day are going to find themselves at the end of a script for another great story with this character. But in the meantime, while a lot of the stuff involving Venom up until now haven't been great, we seem to be going in a new direction, and the latest relaunch of Venom seems to have a solid creative team behind it, and I've heard good things. Such is the life cycle of superheroes of Marvel and DC, and though there are flaws to it, cheap imitations of better stories from the past, lackluster contributions to a character's overall narrative, we would never have gotten Venom if Spider-Man hadn't been around for as long as he had been. And we never would have gotten Agent Venom if both characters weren't still around a decade or so after that. And now we're 7 years past that story, and basically we have a whole new character grown out of it in Agent Anti-Venom. A completely separate character from Venom that has his own character history going all the way back to the earliest days of Spider-Man. And that's pretty much how the story went, at least until now. There was a great series that I love, and ultimately the creators moved on, as did I. The characters went in different directions, and Marvel ended up trying out new things. For a while, it seemed like the matter of Agent Venom was put to bed.
We found something. We call them symbiotes.
We are Venom.
1 second. I guess we're talking about this now.